I call order to the meeting of General Assembly. I now declare open the 76th session of Model United Nations of Student Initiative of Arts. In accordance with the practice of opening General Assembly, may I invite all delegates to rise up and observe a minute of silence for prayer or meditation. Thank you. You may be seated now. Now, I invite you to consider adaptation of today's agenda before us contained in the document A/76-252. If there is no change to the agenda, it is then adopted. It is so decided. General Assembly will now turn to Agenda 8, General Assembly. I will now deliver a statement from Rostrum. Head of States and Government, Ms. Secretary General, distinguished ministers, excellencies, I am honored to welcome you all to the opening of general debate as we kick off the high-level week of 76th session of Model United Nations General Assembly for Students Initiative of Arts, MNU. I am even more pleased to welcome all of you back to an in-person session of the General Assembly. A year and a half we have suffered in silence, in anxiety, and a year and a half we have worried, we have grieved, we have waited. Let us wait no more. Excellencies, I would like to thank Secretary General for her leadership and wisdom, look forward working with her. I must also express gratitude to fellow delegates for putting their faith and trust in me. I am truly humbled and deeply proud to stand as a small islander at this great podium on behalf of our people. Our country may be small and I may be smaller, but today we are mighty. Today we stand with giants. My standing here today in the General Assembly is a reflection of the success of the foreign policy of my country. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have plenty of challenges, but for a moment, let us celebrate all that we have achieved in the past 2 years. In record time, humanity has developed multiple viable vaccines for COVID-19. Scientists and researchers from dozens of countries collaborated on a remarkable feat of human ingenuity. And the largest vaccine rollout in the history of humankind is currently underway. While certainly not without flaws, it is monumental in its undertaking. For this accomplishment alone, we should be proud. Excellencies, before I outline the 76th session and hopeful theme I have chosen to pursue, allow me to ask you this. Where do you want to be at this time next year? And what is it that we as people intend to achieve over the next 12 months? From my discussion with many in this room, from social media, from UN 75 survey, and from the Secretary General's Common Agenda report, the answer is clear. World want peace of mind. People want solution to the challenges we have collectively faced, and challenges are not in short supply. Fragility, conflict, COVID-19, climate change, the list goes on. These issues and more keep our citizens awake at night. They fuel a collective anxiety and a worry that things are progressively getting worse. They worry that we are not doing enough to solve the problem facing our world. And my friends, they are not wrong. We can do more. We know this in our heart. On COVID-19, we have the vaccine, the know-how, the capacity for distribution. We lack only the political support. On climate change, we have incredible innovation in renewable energy, in adaptive technologies, transitioning away from the fossil fuel. We lack again only political support and related financing. On conflict and instability, we have near universal desire for nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation, yet we falter at the finish line, leaving treaties unratified. On humanitarian concern, we have enough food and water to provide for the planet many, many times over. Yet there is a genuine fear that we all see the return of famine and the impact of drought. Hundreds of millions will require humanitarian assistance by the end of this year. Excellencies, I wholeheartedly believe in the power of humanity to overcome these challenges. You cannot live in the Maldives and face the existential threat of sea level rise without having hope on humanity. Well, that hope extends far. I am hopeful that we can overcome differences, that we can bypass protocol and obstacles to transform our societies. With hopeful vision for better tomorrow, I intend to pursue 5 rays of hope that will direct the effort of General Assembly this year. First, I will stand firmly behind the need to ensure vaccine equity, vaccine to the world, vaccinate the world. As President of General Assembly, I intend to host a high-level meeting on just this issue and to address the practical obstacles that we have emerged around the supply, storage, and distribution. Another event later in the session will acknowledge the major environmental efforts underway on the oceans, on the desertifications, on biodiversity, and will aim to address these interlocking issues during this super session on the environment. My 4th ray of hope focuses on human rights, one of the fundamental pillars of our organization. We must uphold the principle of Universal Declaration of Human Rights above all else, particularly during moments of conflict as we have so recently seen. We must also endeavor to always empower and support the most vulnerable and those who have been disadvantaged. 5th and finally, the UN reform and revitalization must continue. It must also continue here in the General Assembly. This is not about balance of power. This is about efficiency. Every organ of UN must be at its peak, must be able to deliver it was intended. We have never had the wealth, the resources, or the know that we have now. There is nothing in our path that stops us from believing ourselves. Let us be the UN that people want us to be. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in the darkest day of pandemic, when the cities were shuttered and the vaccine still a dream, the people of the world came together as never before. They left messages on their windows. They sang for each other from the balconies. They clapped in the evening for their frontline workers, their heroes. They prayed in unison, asking for the miracle that could give us back the normalcy that we took for granted. It was hope and the sense of shared humanity that allowed them to do this. Let us give them hope now. I thank you. May I now invite the Secretary General, Ms. Fatma Lamha, to make her statement.
Madam President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, I'm here to sound the alarm. The world must wake up. We are on the edge of an abyss and moving in the wrong direction. Our world has never been more threatened or more divided. We face the greatest cascade of crises in our lifetimes. The COVID-19 pandemic has superseded glaring inequalities. The climate crisis is pummeling the planet. Upheaval from Afghanistan to Ethiopia to Yemen and beyond has thwarted peace. A surge of mistrust and misinformation is polarizing people and paralyzing societies. Human rights are under fire. Science is under assault. And economic lifelines for the most vulnerable are coming too little and too late if they come at all. Solidarity is missing in action just when we need it most. Perhaps one image tells the tale of our times. The pictures we have seen from some parts of the world of COVID-19 vaccine in the garbage, expired and unused. On one hand, we see the vaccines develop in record time, a victory of science and human ingenuity. On the other hand, we see the triumph undone by the tragedy of lack of political will, selfishness, and mistrust. A surplus in some countries, empty shelves in others. A majority of the wealthier world vaccinated, over 90% of Africans still waiting for their first dose. This is a moral indictment of the state of our world. We passed the science test, but we are getting an F in ethics. Excellencies, the climate alarm bells are also ringing at fever pitch. The recent report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was a code red for humanity. We see the warning signs in every continent and region. Scorching temperatures, shocking biodiversity loss, polluted air, water, and natural spaces, and climate-related disasters at every turn. As we saw recently, not even this city, the financial capital in the world, is immune. Climate scientists tell us it's not too late to keep alive the 1.5-degree goal of the Paris Climate Agreement, but that window is rapidly closing. We need a 45% cut in emissions by 2030, yet a recent UN report made clear that with present national climate commitments, emissions will go up by 16% by 2030. That would condemn us to a hellscape of temperature rises of at least 2.7 degrees above pre-industrial levels, a catastrophe. Meanwhile, the OECD just reported a gap of at least $20 billion in essential and promised climate finance to developing countries. We are weeks away from the UN climate conference in Glasgow and seemingly light years away from reaching our targets. We must get serious and we must act fast. Excellencies, COVID and the climate crisis have exposed profound fragilities as societies and as a planet. Yet instead of humility in the face of these epic challenges, we see hubris. Instead of the path of solidarity, we are on a dead end to destruction. At the same time, another disease is spreading in our world today, a malady of mistrust. The people we serve and represent may lose faith not only in their governments and institutions, but in the values that have animated the work of the United Nations for over 75 years. Peace, human rights, dignity, equality, justice, solidarity. Like never before, core values are in the crosshairs. Promises are worthless if people do not see results in their daily lives. Failure to deliver creates space for some of the darkest impulses of humanity. It provides easy fixes, pseudo-solutions, and conspiracy theories. It is kindling to stoke ancient grievances, cultural supremacy, ideological dominance, violent misogyny, the targeting of the most vulnerable, including refugees and migrants. Excellencies, we face a moment of truth. Now it is time to deliver, to restore trust, inspire hope, and I do have hope. And problems we have created are problems we can solve. Excellencies, we need to bridge the divide among generations. Young people will inherit the consequences of our decisions, good and bad. We need their talents, ideas, and energies. Our common agenda proposes a transforming education summit next year to address the learning crisis and expand opportunities for today's 1.8 billion young people. But young people need more than support. They need a seat at the table. For this, I will appoint a special envoy for future generations and create the United Nations Youth Office, and the contribution of young people will be the central to the summit of the future as set out in our common agenda. Young people need a vision of hope for the future. Recent research shows the majority of young people across 10 countries are suffering from high levels of anxiety and distress over the state of our planet. Some 60% of your future voters will feel betrayed by their governments. We must prove to children and young people that despite the seriousness of the situation, the world has a plan, and governments are committed to implementing it. We need to act now to bridge the great divides and save humanity and the planet. Excellencies, with real engagement, we can live up to the promise of a better and more peaceful world. This is the driving force of our common agenda. The best way to advance the interests of one's own citizen is by advancing the interests of our common future. Interdependence is the logic of the 21st century. This is the Lord Star of the United Nations. This is our time, a moment of transformation. An era to reignite materialism, an age of possibilities. Let us restore trust, let us inspire hope, and let us start right now. Thank you.
As per common practice, now let me invite the host country of United Nations, the representative of United States of America, His Excellency, the President, Mr. Mohammed Shah bin Ilham Rashid, to deliver his statement.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, my fellow delegates, to all those who dedicate themselves to this noble mission of this institution. It's my honor to speak to you for the first time as the President of the United States. We met this year in a moment of intermingled with great pain and extraordinary possibility. We have lost so much to this devastating pandemic that continues to claim lives around the world and impact so much on our existence. We are mourning more than 4.5 million people from every nation, from every background. Each death is an individual heartbreak, but our shared grief is a poignant reminder that our collective future will hinge on our ability to recognize our common humanity and to act together. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the clear and urgent choice that we face here at the dawning of what must be a decisive decade for our world, a decade that will quite literally determine our futures. There's a fundamental truth of the 21st century within each of our own countries and as a global community that our own success is bound up with others succeeding as well. To deliver for our own people, we must also engage deeply with the rest of the world. To ensure that our own future, we must work together with other partners towards a shared future. Over the last 8 months, I have prioritized rebuilding our alliances, revitalizing our partnerships, and recognizing they are essential and central to America's enduring security and prosperity. We renewed our engagement with the European Union, a fundamental partner in tackling the full range of significant issues facing our world today. We are engaging with regional institutions from ASEAN to the African Union to the Organization of American States to focus on people's urgent needs for better health care and better economic outcomes. We are back at the table in the international forums, especially in the United Nations, to focus attention and to spur global action on these shared challenges. We are re-engaged at the World Health Organization and working in close partnership with COVAX to deliver life-saving vaccines around the world. We rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement, and we are running to retake a seat on Human Rights Council next year at the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, the United States will compete and will compete vigorously and lead with our values and our strength. We will stand up for our allies and our friends and oppose attempts by stronger countries to dominate weaker ones, whether through changes to territory by force, economic coercion, technological exploitation, or disinformation. But we are not seeking, I'll say it again, we are not seeking a new Cold War or a world divided into rigid blocks. The United States is ready to work with any nation that steps up and pursues peaceful resolution to these shared challenges. Even if we have intense disagreements in other areas, because we will all suffer the consequences of our failure if we do not come together to address the urgent threats like COVID-19 and climate change or enduring threats like nuclear proliferation. Ladies and gentlemen, as we steer our nations toward this inflection point and work to meet today's fast-moving, cross-cutting challenges, let me be clear, I am not agnostic about the future we want for the world. The future will belong to those who embrace human dignity, not who trample it. The future will belong to those who unleash the potential of their people, not who stifle it. The future will belong to those who give their people the ability to breathe free, not those who seek to suffocate their people with an iron hand. We will lead together with our allies and partners in cooperation with all those who believe, as we do, that this is within our power to meet these challenges, to build a future that lifts all of our people and preserves this planet. But none of this is inevitable, it's a choice. And I can tell you where America stands. We will choose to build a better future. We, you, and I, we have the will and capacity to make it better. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot afford to waste any more time. Let's get to work. Let's make a better future now. We can do this. It's within our power and capacity. Thank you all, and God bless you all.
I thank the representative of United States of America, His Excellency, the President, Mr. Mohammed Shah bin Ilham Rashid, for his statement. Next, I would like to give the floor to the representative of Australia, Her Excellency, the Prime Minister, Ms. Fatma Wania Yamin, to give her statement.
Madam President, it is a pleasure to give Australia's national statement to the General Assembly. Our first people remind us that caring for country and for each other is the essence of our shared humanity. The past year has been one of extraordinary adversity as the world has struggled and dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic, and it continues to rage. Yet it has also borne witness to humanity's remarkable resilience and creative ability to overcome problems, to deliver solutions. Each generation navigates its own destiny amidst anxiety and hope. Ours is no different. Today, I would like to speak about two of the most pressing global challenges that together we face. Madam President, COVID-19 has tested the world like nothing in our lifetime. We mourn the millions lost. After so much sorrow, there is hope now and a way forward. The development of safe and effective vaccines has been one of the greatest achievements of modern times. High vaccination rates are the pathway to taking back so much of what we have lost and to living with this virus confidently, safely, and prosperously. None of us are safe unless all of us are safe. Already, we have delivered more than 3 million doses to countries across our region, and million more doses are on their way. We have also contributed $130 million to the COVAX Advanced Market Commitment, and we are investing more than $620 million to procure millions of vaccine doses. This will help slow the spread of the virus. Madam President, COVID-19 has underscored the vital importance of international cooperation and coordination. Australia's interests are inevitably linked to Indo-Pacific, a region where the rights of all states, no matter how large or how small, are protected. This is what we believe. Strengthened, of course, further last week with the new announcement of our new enhanced trilateral security partnership, AUKUS, designed to further the cause of peace, stability, and security in the Indo-Pacific region for the benefit of all who live within that region. It is essential that countries pursue these interests in ways that are mutually respectful and support stability and security. We must reinforce a sustainable rules-based order while ensuring it is also adaptable to the great power realities of our time. The United Nations must continue to reinforce the international rules-based order and preserve the institutions that uphold that order and ensure they are effective as the mechanisms, the dialogue, and adjudication that buttress and hold together this all-important order. Australia also values the rules and institutions that foster international trade, which creates wealth and brings nations together. And it is vital to recovery from the economic cost of this pandemic. Finally, Madam President, Australia has always sought to make a positive contribution to meeting global challenges. Our voice is clear, it's direct. It reflects our confidence in who we are and what we stand for. We are a proud liberal democracy and we believe in a world order that favors freedom. We believe in human rights, in gender equality, and the rule of law. And we continue to strengthen the international human rights system. And we will continue to raise our voice on important issues. Madam President, we learned through the pandemic that every moment of challenge requires us to think anew, to engage with each other, to learn as you go. It is an experience understood by many others, and so we will continue to meet this moment with dialogue, with partnership. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Australia, Her Excellency, the Prime Minister, Ms. Fatma Twania, for her statement. Next, I would like to invite the representative of Bangladesh, Her Excellency, the Prime Minister, Ms. Zara Hilmi, to make her statement.
Madam President, Assalamu alaikum. I congratulate you on your election as the President of the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly. We have confidence in your presidency of hope to steer us through a sustainable recovery that leaves no one behind. It is my great pride that this is my 17th participation in the United Nations General Assembly to represent my country, Bangladesh. This 76th United Nations General Assembly comes at a time when COVID-19 is claiming lives across the globe. The pandemic has battered the health system and economies across the world. I pay tribute to all the frontline workers for their dedicated service and sacrifice during this crisis. As an evolved supporter of multilateralism and the UN system, Bangladesh wishes to see this organization as a source of hope and inspiration during this critical time. Madam President, this is a very special year for us. This year, we are celebrating the Golden Jubilee of our independence. This celebration coincides with Mujibur, the birth centenary of our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. We have been working hard to fulfill the unfinished dreams of our father of the nation. We are now among the 5 fastest growing economies in the world, ranking 41st in terms of GDP. Over the past decade, we have reduced the poverty rate to 20.5%. Our per capita income jumped to more than threefold in just 1 decade. Madam President, the COVID-19's impact on Bangladesh has been much less than feared. It is mainly because of our healthcare system that has been strengthened from the grassroots level. Notably, we gave serious attention to the most vulnerable sections of our society, like the ultra-poor, disabled elders, returning migrants, and the vulnerable women. and we immediately distributed cash and other kinds of assistance to nearly 40 million people. Madam President, the pandemic has disproportionately impacted the climate vulnerable countries. As the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum and the Vulnerable 20 group of ministers of finance, we have launched the Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan Decade 2030. The upcoming COP26 summit in the Glasgow provides us with a good opportunity to rally support for such new and inclusive ideas. Madam President, as I conclude, I would like to add that we must demonstrate our ability to work and act together on global common issues and create space for new partnerships and solutions. And that must start right here in the UN itself, with the member states across regions rising above narrow political interests. Only then can we pursue any meaningful collaborations towards a resilient and inclusive recovery. At this critical juncture, the United Nations stands as our best hope. Let us join our hands together to keep that hope alive. Thank you all once again. Khuda Hafiz, Joy Bangla Band, May Bangladesh live forever. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Bangladesh, Her Excellency the Prime Minister, Ms. Zahra Hilmi, for her statement. Next, I would like to invite the representative of Brazil, Her Excellency the President, Ms. Aishat Rassan Azad, to make her statement.
Madam President of the General Assembly, Madam Secretary General of the United Nations, dear heads of state, government, and other heads of delegations, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to speak at the General Assembly of the United Nations once again. I come here to show Brazil different from what it is published in newspapers or seen on televisions. Brazil has changed a lot after we took over the government in January 2019. We have successfully survived 2 years and 8 months without any concrete case of corruption. Brazil has a president who believes in God, respects her military, values the family, and owes loyalty to its people. Brazil was almost on the edge of falling into socialism. Today, with a recovered credibility and state-owned companies at its most top, I present to you a new Brazil. Brazil has the largest investment partnership program with the private initiative of its history. To look into the infrastructure, after an auction for 34 airports and 29 port terminals, we have received over $6 billion in private contracts for new railways. It is with great pleasure that I would like to announce to you that Brazil is the only country to be able to complete an environmental legislation, which is a modern and sustainable low-carbon agriculture that feeds more than 1 billion people in the world and only takes 8% of the national territory to do so. We anticipate on achieving the goal of climate neutrality by 2050 to 2060. We ratify the Inter-American Convention Against Racism and Forms Related to Intolerance. Brazil has always been a participant of the UN peacekeeping missions. We have always welcomed refugees on our border with neighboring Venezuela. The federal government's operation has received over 400,000 Venezuelans displaced due to various crises generated by the Bolivarian dictatorship. The future of Afghanistan is also one of our deep concerns, and Brazil will grant humanitarian visas to Christians, women, and children of Afghanistan. While at that, I reiterate our repudiation of terrorism in all its shapes. I thank the 181 countries out of the 190 countries who trusted Brazil through the responsible foreign policy presented by our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We will again occupy a seat on the Security Council of the UN in 2022. We support a reform on the UN Security Council where we look for a permanent seat. The year 2020 was a surprise for all of us. We regret all of the deaths occurred in Brazil and the whole world. Although the measures taken in order to be safe from the virus led to a lot of disadvantages in the economy, we provided emergency aid to those in need. And within the first 7 months of 2021, we have created over 1,800,000 new jobs. The federal government has distributed more than 260 million doses of vaccines, in which 90% of the adult population and 80% of the indigenous population has been fully vaccinated. On our Independence Day, September 7th, millions of Brazilians took the street in a peaceful and patriotic way in order to demonstrate our history and to show that they do not give up on democracy, in freedom of individuality, and in support of our government. Today, Brazil is living in new times. My government has recovered its external credibility and presents itself as one of the best investment destinations. It is here in this General Assembly that we glimpse a world of more freedom, democracy, prosperity, and peace. God bless you all.
Next, I would like to invite the representative of China, His Excellency, the President, Mr. Muhammad Ulwan Muaz, for his statement.
Jushi Sienshen, Ashur Inyang Due Chungo Remin Shir Iga, Chiji Tusa da Niemfing, Jinian Shur Chungo, Kunchangdan Changli Ibai, Jonieng, Jinian Yashir, Chunhua Reming, Gunhago, Huefu Zailiang Hago Fasi, Wei Wushur Jornien, Jian Lon Zonjinian, Chaili Shirsin, Shur Jian. Women Jianchi Sujichi Tuedon Chungotang, Lien Hago, Hazo, Me Xianxing, Taiji, Weliang Hago, Jongao, Shur Yepuduang, Zuocho, Sinda Genda Gunshin, Jushi Xianxin. Inian Chieng, Gagua Lindao, Rengunton Chunshila Liang Hago, Changli Chi Shiru, Joning, Sili Fanghue. Fabaula Jenjur, Sher Nien. Chan Noho, Zu Okang Ichin. Shijo Ing Duo, Tiao Jang. Changji Duo Bien Jui. Ja Chiang Liang Hago, Zo Yung, Gao Jien Jinshir Hodai, Dagunto, Guntong Welai. Inian Lai Shur Jie by Nian Veo, Gurdada Bienchu Hasinga. Feyang Iching, Feyang Dali Ohang, Jauchur, Inshien. Gago Remming, Due Hapim, Ferjaen, the Peach and Jia Chiring. Due Gumping, Jang E the Hushen, Genchien Chali, Due Hazuo, Gun in the Zuechi, Gen Jia Chingading. Joshi Sienshin. Shirjie Yo Jianzai, Li Shirda, Shirza Luko. Woman Shin Reng, Woman Shin Leda, Herpin Faje, Jimbu the Chaulia, Puka Zudan. Ram Woman Jiang Ding Sin Shin, Shisho, Ingdue Shue Chincho, Shinwe Shihatai Aujan. Due Tongao, Jinrienle, Minyung Gontin, Guntong, Jiangshir, Jangli, Mehauda, Shirjie. Shishie, Dajio, Wanshir Rui.
I would like to thank the representative of China, His Excellency, the President, Mr. Muhammad Ulwan Muaz, for his statement. Next, I would like to invite the representative of Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK, Mr. Mikhail Ahmad Sharif, to make his statement.
Madam President, Madam Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, firstly, I would like to begin by mentioning the anti-epidemic measures taken by the DPRK to curb the spread of COVID-19. However, due to external and internal factors of the DPRK, the circumstances are quite unfavorable. Regardless, the DPRK is undeterred by these hardships and are on track to achieving its development goals, which are grounded by the most stable political system in the world. Despite the hardships caused by the pandemic, we still have reached many goals. For instance, the industrial sector has been developed to meet our policy of self-sufficiency. Moreover, our grain production plan is also on sound footing due to our policies of tackling climate change. As the Workers' Party maintains that it tries to provide the Korean people with a good and stable life, children throughout the DPRK are being provided with nutritious food and dairy products free of charge. Furthermore, the state is providing advanced housing to accommodate the people's needs. Madam President, on September 17, 1991, the DPRK became the United Nations 160th member state. However, as Korea was split, the Republic had to occupy 2 different seats in the United Nations. As a result, we have repeatedly advocated that the North and South of Korea join the United Nations under one single seat. The Korean nation, which lived under one bloodline, was forced to be split into 2. Ultimately, this is the root cause for the misfortunes inflicted upon the Korean nation. Sadly, even today, the DPRK is faced by a hostile policy by various world powers, especially the United States and its Western allies due to the so-called nuclear issue. The Western allies refuses to acknowledge our sovereignty and has blocked trade and political relationships with the DPRK under the pretext of multiple false claims, and has even threatened our great nations with military drills and intimidating mobilization of its proxy armies as seen in the Command exercise. We should not forget that the West and the DPRK are still at a state of unresolved conflict ever since the Korean War. Moreover, our enemies are investing heavily into military equipment in order to threaten us. Therefore, we believe that it is right for the DPRK to exercise our self-defense and possess weapons equivalent to our enemies. Madam President, the only way peace and stability of the Korean Peninsula can be maintained is by curbing this hostile foreign policy. Even though the Western administrations claim that it has no hostile policy towards us, they should show us a friendlier policy through political actions rather than words. However, we do not think that the Western powers are ready to abandon this hostile policy, and in the backdrop of threats and slander lasting almost 70 years, we have become quite accustomed to it. Madam President, the United Nations Security Council should not be swayed by big Western powers and should rightfully criticize reckless arms and war crimes conducted by certain powerful nations instead of critiquing the DPRK self-defense policy. The United Nations should hold a firm line against big powers interfering in sovereign states, as some countries try to change the political system in the pretext of defending democracy and human rights. These actions lead to chaos, bloodshed, and violence. Madam President, I would like to conclude by reminding you all that our glorious nation, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, remains unchanged in its foreign policy of continued independence, peace, and friendship. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Democratic People, Republic of Korea, DPRK, Mr. Mikhail Ahmed, for his statement. Now, I would like to give floor to the representative of France, Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of France, Mr. Mohamed Raid Ali, to make his statement.
Madame la Présidente de l'Assemblée générale, Monsieur le Secrétaire général, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs de délégation. By reminding us of the extent to which our destinies are linked, for better and for worse, the pandemic crisis has reminded us of the value of what has united us at this organization for over 75 years. The will to cooperate, the primacy of law over force, unconditional respect for the human person. The principles of our charter have not lost any of their meaning. In fact, quite the opposite. Today's crises and challenges have made them even more essential. Our security, our health, and our planet are now common goods which together we must strive to preserve. This imperative is not abstract, it is not an ideal. C'est très concrètement la raison de chacun de nos choix. And just as definitively, it is our punishment each time we are divided, each time we give up, each time we are powerless. Because in a world of exchanges and interdependencies, a world with environmental emergencies, a world facing worrying attitudes of brutalization and the constant temptation of unilateralism, everything that we do together, and conversely, everything that we fail to do, involves all of us. We must be aware of this and learn lessons from it, together. Although the foundations of the multilateral system have remained solid in the face of attacks in recent years, too many uncontrolled risks are building up. On behalf of France, my first message to you today is thus one of responsibility. Our first shared responsibility is to maintain international peace and security. And it is in danger when power games are heightened, when bloc mentalities reappear, when our regulatory frameworks collapse, when attempts at fait accompli policies increase. These principles that unite us, we have the responsibility to keep alive today by upholding them and to include them in the digital realm as well. We have seen increasingly irresponsible behaviors flourish without managing, unfortunately, to provide an international normative response to regulate them and to ensure that the rights and freedoms of all are respected. The introduction of a minimum universal 15% tax for multinational companies will help achieve this. We therefore call on all states to support this vital measure. France and its European partners even intend to adopt actual legalization on digital markets. We encourage our international partners to follow us down this path, and we invite them to work with us to establish a new digital public order in the wake of the Paris Call and the Christchurch Call to Action, which since 2019 has enabled us to take decisive actions to remove terrorist content from the internet. Collective responsibility in international peacekeeping and security, shared responsibility in tackling today's major challenges, responsibility of each of us with regard to what unites us. For France, this is what the historic turning point we are all experiencing calls for. We must all rise up to the challenge. While our country is preparing to take over the presidency of the Council of the European Union in the first half of 2020, you can, ladies and gentlemen, count on our determination to fully assume our share in these three prolonged responsibilities. Engaging us in all the security, solidarity, and equality combats. Pour rebâtir avec vous notre monde commun. Je vous remercie.
I would like to thank the representative of France, Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of France, Mr. Mohamed Raid Ali Shaid. Next, I would like to invite the representative of Germany, the Chancellor, Mr. Mohammad Iyad Massoud, to make his statement.
Madam President, distinguished colleagues, excellencies, delegates of the United Nations General Assembly. As we meet here in this venerable forum, the final rallies of a long election campaign are being held in Germany. 60 million people will decide on new coalitions and on the successor of a federal chancellor who has governed Germany for 16 years. Distinguished colleagues, at this time of political transition in my country, I would like to assure you, even after this election, Germany remains a country that is aware of its international responsibility and shoulders it. Firstly, we Germans do not forget. The political and economic rebirth after 2 world wars, our journey to re-enter the international community, after all the horrors for which my country had been responsible, and finally, our peaceful reunification. This Germany's path of fortune was only possible with the support of our neighbors and partners. Secondly, we are convinced that the path to a more peaceful future, the resolution of the major issues facing humanity, is going to require much more cooperation within the international community. The preamble of Germany's basic law formulates our aspiration in brief but precise terms to promote world peace as an equal partner in a united Europe. We have an ongoing responsibility, particularly towards the many Afghans who had hoped for a more peaceful, free, and democratic future. Yet, I believe we need to ask ourselves, what conclusions do we draw from the failure in Afghanistan? Firstly, we need to be honest when considering our options and our limits. Secondly, we need to be smarter in selecting our instruments and setting our priorities. What we need to do is extend our toolbox, diplomatic, military, civilian, and humanitarian. And thirdly, even though some may find this paradoxical, we need to get stronger when it comes to our means. In all our countries, the citizens expect their governments to protect them from threat and attack. However, it is clear as well that future generations will not judge us on our military strength today, but on whether we were able to resolve future problems and conflicts. We need strength at the negotiating table just as we need strength in defense. The major powers, the United States, China, and Russia, shoulder a particular responsibility here. The privileges the major powers enjoy in the United Nations system are only justified provided that they promote and uphold the international peaceful order in the interest of all. The United Nations is not a boxing ring devoid of values at the disposal of the world powers. However, I do know that the hand pointing the finger at others has other fingers pointing back at ourselves. We Europeans must do more for our own security, do more for peace and stability in our neighborhood. The responsibility of the major powers, including us Europeans, weighs all the heavier when we call to mind the global challenges, the major issues facing humanity. Never before have we had such an existential experience of our interdependence, our reliance on one another, as we have had in the almost 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVAX initiative under the auspices of the United Nations is the right way forward together. 1 in 3 COVAX vaccine doses is being made available by Europe, and as the world's second largest donor, having pledged $2 billion, my country will contribute at least another 100 million additional doses by the end of the year. What holds true for the existential threat posed by the pandemic is just as true when it comes to climate change. At this time, we need to make stronger decisions together in Glasgow. After all, when it comes to climate change, the gap between our ambitious goals and our concrete policies remains much too wide. It is our job to close this gap together, and we have to close it now. After all, we are living in an era in which humankind can irreversibly destroy the living conditions on our planet. It is up to us, to our generation, to leave the future open for our children and grandchildren. This is, and I'm not using this lofty word lightly, this is our historic task. We do, of course, know that the political systems are in reality never perfect. Consequently, they can neither be exported nor taking it further imposed. I believe the task to be performed is a different one. It is not by missionary zeal, but by letting the strength of democracy shine through at home, by bringing democracy to bear in the daily lives of our citizens, and by resisting the temptation of authoritarianism, that we render the best service to this tremendous idea. I would like to emphasize, democracy is not directed against anyone. It is an open project, regardless of compass reading, regardless of geographical borders, regardless of skin color. It is the project for freedom. That is why more realism in foreign policy does not mean less responsibility and less ambition to make the world a better place. On the contrary, the inherent human yearning for freedom and dignity and self-determination will never be extinguished anywhere, doing justice to this human yearning instead of suppressing it. That is the real question defining our future in the 21st century, and this question will not be decided on any battlefield on our earth. After all, the firepower of the most powerful armies come to an end. The long arm of the strongest state comes to an end. But the appeal of freedom and democracy in the hearts and minds of people lives on. That is my firm belief.
I would like to thank the representative of Germany, the Chancellor, Mr. Muhammad Iyad Massoud, for his statement. The Assembly will now hear an address by Her Excellency Ms. Aminat Iba Abdullah, Prime Minister of Republic of India.
नमस्कार साथियों, सबसे पहले मैं हर एक्सेलेंसी अमतुल्ला को पद संभालने की बहुत बधाई देती हूँ। आपका अध्यक्ष बनना सभी विकासशील देशों और आइलैंड कंट्रीज़ के लिए बहुत गौरव की बात है। अध्यक्ष महोदय, मैं उस देश का नेतृत्व करता हूँ जिसे मदर ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी कहे जाने की गौरव हासिल है। लोकतंत्र की हमारी हज़ारों वर्षों की परंपरा है। इस 15 अगस्त को भारत ने अपने आज़ादी के 75वें वर्ष में प्रवेश किया है। हमारी विविधता हमारी सशक्त लोकतंत्र की पहचान है। एक ऐसा देश जिसमें दर्जनों भाषाएं हैं, सैकड़ों बोलियां हैं, अलग अलग रहन सहन और खान पान है, यह वाइब्रेंट डेमोक्रेसी का बेहतरीन उदाहरण है। The philosophy of Ekatma Manav Darshan, which means expansion of the self, moving from individual to the society, the nation and entire humanity, and this contemplation is dedicated to Antyodaya. अंत्योदय को आज के भाषा में where no one is left behind कहा जाता है। इस भावना के साथ अब भारत आज इंटीग्रेटेड इक्विटेबल डेवलपमेंट के राह पे आगे बढ़ रहा है। अध्यक्ष महोदय, आज विश्व में हर चौथा आदमी भारतीय है। जब भारतीय की प्रगति होती है तो विश्व के विकास को भी गति मिलती है। When India grows, the world grows, and when India reforms, the world transforms. भारत में हो रहे साइंस और टेक्नोलॉजी आधारित इनोवेशंस विश्व की बहुत मदद कर सकते हैं। हमारे टेक सॉल्यूशंस का स्केल और उनकी कम लागत दोनों अतुलनीय है। हमारे यूनिफाइड पेमेंट इंटरफेस यूपीआई आज भारत में हर महीने 350 करोड़ से ज़्यादा ट्रांजैक्शंस हो रहे हैं। भारत के वैक्सीन डिलीवरी प्लेटफॉर्म कोविन एक दिन में करोड़ों वैक्सीन डोज लगाने के लिए डिजिटल सपोर्ट दे रहे हैं। भारत में हो रहे साइंस और टेक्नोलॉजी इनोवेशंस विश्व की बहुत मदद कर सकते हैं। आज हम सब जानते हैं कि मानव जीवन में टेक्नोलॉजी का कितना महत्व है, लेकिन बदलते हुए विश्व में टेक्नोलॉजी विद डेमोक्रेटिक वैल्यूज़ की सुनिश्चित करना भी आवश्यक है। भारतीय मूल के डॉक्टर्स, इनोवेटर्स, इंजीनियर्स, मैनेजर्स सभी किसी भी देश में रहे, हमारे लोकतंत्र मूल्य उन्हें मानवता की सेवा में जुड़े रहने की प्रेरणा देते रहते हैं, और ये हमने इस कोरोना काल में भी देखा है। अध्यक्ष महोदय, कोरोना महामारी ने विश्व को ये भी सबक दिया है, वैश्विक अर्थव्यवस्था को अब और भी अधिक डाइवर्सिफाई किया जाए। इसके लिए ग्लोबल वैल्यू चेन्स का विस्तार आवश्यक है। हमारा आत्मनिर्भर भारत अभियान इसी भावना से प्रेरित है। ग्लोबल इंडस्ट्रियल डाइवर्सिफिकेशन के लिए भारत विश्व का एक लोकतांत्रिक और भरोसेमंद पार्टनर बन रहा है, और इस अभियान में भारत ने इकोनॉमी और इकोलॉजी दोनों में बेहतर संतुलन स्पष्ट है। बड़े और विकसित देशों की तुलना में क्लाइमेट एक्शन को लेकर भारत के प्रयासों को देखकर आप सबको निश्चित गर्व होगा। आज भारत अब बहुत तेज़ी के साथ 450 गीगावाट रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी की लक्ष्य की तरफ बढ़ रहा है। हम भारत को दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन हब बनाने के अभियान में भी जुट गए हैं। अध्यक्ष महोदय, यूएन पर आज कई तरह के सवाल खड़े हो रहे हैं। इन सवालों को हमने क्लाइमेट क्राइसिस पे देखा है, कोविड के दौरान भी देखा है। दुनिया में एक ही जगह चल रहे प्रॉक्सी वार, आतंकवाद और अभी अफगान की संकट ने इन सवालों को और भी गहरा कर दिया है। ये आवश्यक है कि हम यूएन को ग्लोबल ऑर्डर, ग्लोबल लॉज और ग्लोबल वैल्यूज़ की संरक्षण के लिए निरंतर सुदृढ़ करें। मुझे विश्वास है हम सबका प्रयास विश्व में शांति और सौहार्द बढ़ाएगा और विश्व को स्वस्थ, सुरक्षित और समृद्ध बनाएगा। इन शुभकामनाओं के साथ बहुत बहुत नमस्कार, धन्यवाद।
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank Prime Minister of Republic of India for her statement. Next, I would like to invite the representative of Maldives, Her Excellency the President, Ms. Zaina Muhammad, to make her statement.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Izzat Rais, Secretary General Vadaganti Pevi Izzatering, Assalamu alaikum. Dive Hiradja, Mige Fansas Aharukuring, Minivan Daulatege Magam Libumaiku, දිවෙහින් අවස්ව ගති අලිෆ්තාල්ගේ මෙම්බරක දිවෙහි රාජ්‍ය හෙදුමම් එහෙනස් එකන් හාසල් කුරුමන් ඒරු දිවෙහි රාජ්‍ය ෆත කුදි ගෞමුතක අලිෆ්තාල්ගේ මෙම්බරුකන් දිනුමාමෙදු ಬಾರುಗದ ಬೊಡತಿ ಕೌಮ್ದಕ್ಕೆ ರೌಯಕಿ ಎದುವಹು ದಿವೆಹಿಣ್ಣಾವೆಸ್ ಕುರಿಮತಿವಿ ಎಮ್ಮೆ ಬೊಡು ಸುವಾಲ್ ಅಲಿಫ್ತಾಲ್ಗೆ ರಿಯಾಸತ ಮುಹಾತಬ್ ಕುರವ್ವ ದಿವೆಹಿಂಗೆ ಮಾದರಿ ಬಹುಂ ವಾಹಕ ದೆಕ್ಕುಮಕಿ ಮಿನಿವನ್ ದೌಲತೆಗ್ಗೆ ಮಕಾಮು ಮೀಗೆ ಫನ್ಸಾಸ್ ಅಹರು ಕುರಿನ್ ರಾಜ್ಯ ಲಿಬುಮಾ ಗುಳಿಗೆಂ ಬೈನಲ್ ಅಕ್ವಾಮಿ ಮಸ್ಟಹುಗ ಬಸ್ಪುಣುಮುಗೆ ಗಾಬಿಲಿಯತ ಮೆದುಗಯ ದಿವೆಹಿ ರಾಜ್ಯಕಿ ಎಕಮ ಕುಫು ಹಮವಾ ಕೌಮೆತ್ತೋ ಬೈನಲ್ ಅಕ್ವಾಮಿ ಮೇದಾಣ್ಗ ಕುರವುಣು ಸುವಾಲ್ಗೆ ಜವಾಬ್ ಮೀ ಹುರಿಹಾ ದಿವೆಹಿಣ್ಣಲ್ ನಿಬುಣು ನುಹಣು ಬಡು ಉಫಲಕ ಮತಿವೆರಿ ಶರಫೆ ಇಜ್ಜತೆ ರೈಸ್ ಮೂಸುಮಂಗ್ ಅಣ್ಣ ಬದಲ್ತಕುಂ ಕುರಿಮತಿವಾ ಮಸಲ್ ತದ್ದಣಿ ಗಿಣವೆ ಬೊಡು ಅಮುಂ ದುನಿಯೆಗೆ ಆಬಾದಿ ಇತುರುವ ಮುಂದಾಯಿರು ಬಲಿಮಡುಕಮ ಹ್ಯಾಹೂಣುಕಮುಂ ಉಫದ್ದ ಬಣವಿಲಾತ ಕೆಹಿಗೆಣ್ಣುದೆ ಅದಿ ಎಮ್ಮೆ ಬೊಡು ಬಿರುಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತುಗೊಯ್ ಬಿರುವೆರಿಕಂ ಇತುರ ದಣಿ ಬೊಡು ಅಮು ಟೆರರಿಸಮ್ಮಕಿ ಎಮ್ಮೆ ಬೊಡು ಎಗ್ಗೊಂಜೆಹು ಮಿಕಂಕಮುಂ ಅರಾಗತುಮ ದುನಿಯೆ ಎತ್ತಂವೆ ಎಬ್ಬಸ್ ಕಿಯಂಜೆಹೆ ಇತುರು ಹಿವ್ವರ ಅಜುಮುಂ ಅಮಾಜೆಂ ಹೋದಂಜೆಹೆ ಟೆರರಿಸಮ್ಗೆ ಅಮಲ್ತಂ ಹುಟ್ಟುಮ ಬೈನಲ್ ಅಕ್ವಾಮಿ ಮುಜ್ತಮೌಂ ಎಬ್ಬಾರ್ ಲುಂದಿಗೆಂ ದಿವೆಹಿ ರಾಜ್ಯೈ ಮಸೆಕ್ಕೆ ಕುರಾಣೆ ಕಮ್ಗೆ ಯಕೀನ್ಕಂ ಮಿಫುರುಸತುಗ ಅರುವಂ ಅದಿ ಮಿಕಮುಗ ಮುಳಿ ಬೈನಲ್ ಅಕ್ವಾಮಿ ಮುಜ್ತಮೌಗೆ ಎಬ್ಬಾರ್ ಲುಮಂ ಅಳುಕುಂ ಕುವಾಲಂ ಇಜ್ಜತೆ ರೈಸ್ ಕೋವಿಡ್ ನವಾರಫದ ಬಲಿಮಡು ಕಮೆ ತಕುರಾರುವಿಯ ನುದಿನುಮಟ್ಟಕ ಮುಳಿ ದುನಿಯ ಭರೋಸಾವಣಿ ಅಲಿಫ್ತಾಲ್ಗೆ ಆಮು ಮಜಿಲೀಹ ಮಿಕಮ ಬೇಣುವ ವಸೀಲತ್ತಕ ಹಕತಯ ಇಲ್ಮ ಹುಣರ ಹೋದುಂತಂ ಎತ್ತಂಕೊ ಎಕಮುಗ ಹಿಸ್ಸಾವುಮಂ ಎಬ್ಬಸ್ವಾಂಜೆಹೆ ಇಜ್ಜತೆ ರೈಸ್ ಮೂಸುಮಿ ಬದಲ್ತಕ ಗುಳೆ ಶಕುವಾಯ ಕುರ ವಕಾಲಾತುಗ ಅಮಾಂದಿ ಫಹತಜ್ಜಹುಮಕಿ ದಿವೆಹಿಣ್ಣಂವೆಂ ಇಖ್ತಿಯಾರೆಣ್ಣು ತಿಮಾವೆಟ್ಟಲ್ಲಿಬೆ ಗೆಲ್ಲುಮ ಮೂಸುಮಂಗಣ್ಣ ಬದಲ್ತವ್ಗೆ ಗೆಲ್ಲು ಮುಳಿ ಇನ್ಸಾನಿಯತವ್ವೆಸ್ ಪೊಡು ಮಿಯದು ದಿರಾಸಾತಕ ಇಲ್ಮಿ ಹಗೀಗತ್ತಕ ಸೈಂಟಿಫಿಕ್ ರಾವ್ಯು ಹೆಕಿದೇಕಮೆ ಮೂಸುಮಂಗಣ್ಣ ಬದಲ್ತ ಕುಡಕುರು ಮಟ್ಟಕ ಕುರಿಂಗ್ ಅಳಂಜೆಹೆ ಫಿಯವಳು ತಣ್ಣಾಳ ಹುರುಮ್ಗೆ ಸಬಬು ಮಿಹಾರು ಎವ್ವೆಸ್ ಕಮೆ ಫಹುಂ ಕುರಂ ಬೆಹೆಟ್ಟೆ ಕಣ್ಣೆ ಎಗೊತುನ್ ದುನಿಯೆ ಹೂಣುವುಂ 1.5 ಡಿಗ್ರಿ ಸೆಲ್ಸಿಯಸ್ಗ ಹಿಫೆಹೆಟ್ಟು ಮಟ್ಟಕಾವೆಸ್ ಮಿಹಾರು ಜವ್ವ ದೂಕುರ ಗೆಂದಬುಳಿಗೆ ನಿಸ್ಪೆತ್ ದೆಹಾಸ್ ತಿರೀಸ್ವಣ ಹರ ಹಮೆಯ ದಾಯಿರು ಸಾಳಿಸ್ ಫಸ್ ಇನ್ಸತ್ತೆ ದಕ್ಕುರಂಜೆಹೆ ಮೂಸುಮಂಗಣ್ಣ ಬದಲ್ತವ್ಗೆ ನೇದವೆ ಅಸರುತ ಕುಡಕುರು ಮಟ್ಟಕ ಫಿಯವಳಳುಮಂ ಅದಿವೆಸ್ ಫುರುಸತ್ ವೆಬ್ಬೆ ಮೂಸುಮಂಗಣ್ಣ ಬದಲ್ತಕ ಗುಳೇಗೊತುಂ ಅಮಲ್ ಕುರಮುಂ ಅಣ್ಣ ದುವಸ್ವಿ ಸಿಯಾಸತ್ತಕಂ ಇಂಗಿಲಾಬಿ ಬದಲೆಗ್ಗೆಣ್ಣಂಜೆಹೆ ಎಗೊತುಂ ಜವ್ವ ಬೇರು ಕುರ ವಿಹ ಮಾದ್ದಾತ ಮದುಕುರುಮಂ ಅಳ ಫಿಯವಳುತ ವರುಗದ ಕುರುಮುಗೆ ಇತುರುಂ ಮೂಸುಮಂಗಣ್ಣ ಬದಲ್ತಕ ಗುಳೆ ಫಣ್ಣಿ ಕಾಬಿಲ್ಕಮ ಎಕಶೇನ ಟೆಕ್ನಾಲಜಿಗೆ ವಸೀಲತ್ತವ್ಗೆ ಅಗು ಎಫ್ಫೋರಾ ಫಶುಗ ಬೆಹೆಟ್ಟು ಮುಹಿಮ್ಮು ಅದಿ ಮೂಸುಮಂಗ್ ಅಣ್ಣ ಬದಲ್ತಕ ಗುಳಿಗೆನ್ ದಿಮಾವ ಕಂಕಮುನ್ ದಿಫಾವುಮ್ಗೆ ಕಾಬಿಲ್ಕಮ ಮಾಲಿ ತಣವಸ್ಕಣ್ ನೆಗ್ ಗೌಮುತಕಂ ಎ ಕಾಬಿಲ್ಕಂ ಹುರಿ ಗೌಮುತಕುಂ ಕುರ ಹೇದಯ ದೇ ಎಹಿ ಇತುರು ಕುರಂಜೆಹೆ ಮೂಸುಮಂಗಣ್ಣ ಬದಲ್ತಕ್ಕುಗೆ ಗೆಲ್ಲುಂ ಕುಡಕುರುಮಟ್ಟಕ ಕುರ ಮಸೆಕ್ಕತುಗೆ ತೆರೆಯಿಂ ಇರಾದ ಕುರಣಿವಿ ಹಕತೆಯಂ ಹಿಜ್ರ ಕುರುಮ ಕುರ ಮಸೆಕ್ಕತಕಿ ಕೊಮ್ಮೆ ದುಹಕು ಕುರ ಕಮಕಂ ಹೆದು ಮುಹಿಮ್ಮು ಇಜ್ಜತೆ ರೈಸ್ ಅಲಿಫ್ತಾಲ್ಗೆ ಎತಂ ಅಹರೆಗ್ಗೆ ಮಸೆಕ್ಕತುಂ ವೆಸ್ ಫಲಸ್ತೀನುಗೆ ರೈಯಿತುಂಗೆ ಹಗ್ಗುತವ್ವಣಿ ಕಶವರುಕೊಂಡುದೆವಿ ಇಸ್ರೇಲುಂ ಫಲಸ್ತೀನುಗೆ ಎತ ಬೈಗ್ಗೆ ಹಗ್ಗುತ ತಕುರಾರುಕೊಂಡು ನಿಗುಳಗಂಡ ಮುಂದೆ ಅಲಿಫ್ತಾಲ್ಗೆ ಆಮು ಮಜಿಲೀಹ ಸೆಕ್ಯೂರಿಟಿ ಕೌನ್ಸಿಲುಂ ಫಲಸ್ತೀನುಗೆ ಹಗ್ಗುಗ ನೆರುನು ಗರಾರುತಕ ನಿಮ್ಮುಂತ ಗಿನನಮವೆಸ್ ಮಿಯದಾ ಹಮೆಯವೆಸ್ ಫಲಸ್ತೀನುಗೆ ಹಗ್ಗು ಕಶವರು ಕುರೈಫಾಣುವೆ ದಿವೆಹಿಂ ಎದೆಣಿ ಫಲಸ್ತೀನಕಿ ಅಲಿಫ್ತಾಲ ಮುಳಿ ದುನಿಯೆಂವೆಸ್ ಮಿನಿವಂ ಕೌಮೆಕ್ಕೆ ಗೊತ್ತುಗ ಬಲಗಣ್ಣ ಕೌಮಕವ್ವುಮ ಎಮೀಹುಂಗೆ ಮಿನಿವಂಕಮ ಹಗ್ಗುತಕ ಇಮ್ತಿಯಾಜ ಇಖ್ತಿಯಾರ್ತ ದೂಕೊಲ್ಲುಮ ಫಲಸ್ತೀನುಗೆ ಮಿನಿವನ್ ದೌಲತಕ ವಕಾಲತ್ ಕುರುಮುಗ ದಿಮೆಹಿಂ ಅಬದುವೆಸ್ ತೆಮಿತಿಬೇಣ ಇಜ್ಜತೆ ರೈಸ್ ಇನ್ಸಾನಿಯತಂ ಅದಿವೆಸ್ಸೊಯಂ ಎಮ್ಮೆ ಬೊಡು ಉಮ್ಮೀದಕಿ ಅಲಿಫ್ತಾಲ್ ಬೈನಲ್ ಅಗ್ವಾಮಿ ಗುಳುಂತಕುಂ ಹಾಸಿಲ್ವಾ ಕೊಮ್ಮೆ ಕಾಮಿಯಾಬಿಯ ರಂಜು ಕೊದ್ದಣಿ ಅಲಿಫ್ತಾಲ್ ಸುಲ್ಹವೆರಿ ಹಲ್ಲ ಮಸಲಸ್ ಕಮುಗೆ ಸಲ್ಲಾ ಉಫೆದಣಿ ಅಲಿಫ್ತಾಲ್ಗೆ ಮಿ ಮರುಕಜುಂ මීගේ ඉතුරුම් වෙස් ෆගීරුකමා බලමඩුකමා ටෙරරිසම් ෆද කංකන් නත්තාලුමුගේ මසෙක්කතුගේ ෆන්නේ තජරිබා එම්මෙ මුස්සන්දි බේංක කීවෙස් අලිෆ්තාල්ගේ මි ඉස්සත්තරි මජ්ලිහුගේ මසෙක්කත කාමියාබියගෙද වර බඩ ශුක්‍රියා.
I would like to thank the representative of Maldives, Her Excellency, the President, Ms. Zaina Mohammed, for her statement. Next, I would like to invite the representative of Russian Federation, Foreign Minister, Mr. Mohammad Rahman, to make his statement.
Madam President, Madam Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, I am glad to have this opportunity to speak at UNGA. This symbolizes our readiness for normal communication suspended at the beginning of COVID-19. The broad cooperation at the UN is relevant, with the trans-border threats expanding and hotbeds of tensions having destabilizing potential. Attempts to use might is right instead of right is might is increasing. There is no consensus for principles of world order. For Russia, the threats and challenges can be countered effectively through strict compliance with UN Charter. We are witnessing attempts to diminish the UN role. Attempts are visible in rules-based order, a concept of the West. No one opposes to rule. UN Charter is a set of rules. Rules and norms should be approved by all countries at universal platforms. West wants to exclude those who have their own different point of view. Berlin and Paris announced alliance for multilateralism. But what could be more multilateral than the UN? US came up with the idea for Summit for Democracy, where they choose the participants. This hijacks the right to decide to what degree a country meets the standard of democracy. It is done in the spirit of the Cold War. This is done against the word that United States is not seeking to divide the world into opposing blocs. President Biden announced rejection of military methods to remake other countries. We expect to take this one step further and reject methods of imposing their development model on others. The rule-based order is based on double standards. Right of self-determination is absolute when it serves West's interest. When it runs counter to West's interest, the West forgets about it being absolute. Some countries are trying to rewrite World War II history and to weaken UN-centric world order. Rule-based order risks falling into bloc policy. We need to draw lessons from the policies undermining UN-centric architecture. The world needs unity. Russia rejects any confrontation and stereotypes, and Security Council needs to adapt the reality for polycentric world. President Putin has proposed a P5 summit to discuss the global stability issues. Russia-US Geneva summit has had great expectations, where US agrees without any precondition to the new strategic arms reduction treaty. We are waiting for the response to our proposal from NATO members. A new challenge and threat, the intention of some countries to militarize the internet and unleash a cyber arms race. Russia advocates to ensure information security by universal agreements, not based on anyone's special rules. Also, some countries view outer space as an area for confrontation. It is a dangerous trend, and we propose to prohibit placement of weapons in outer space. President Putin's call for a broad anti-terrorism coalition is now more relevant than ever. Regional conflicts should be settled based on international law involving all stakeholders. Russia continues to normalize the relations between Iran and its Arab neighbors. We expect the World Conference on Intercultural and Interfaith Dialogue to be held in May 2022 to overcome regional crisis. The significance of the dimensions of the UN is increasing. We must avoid the temptation to turn this into games and unfair practices. COVID-19 is our common enemy. We support vaccines approved by national oversight bodies, and we must not cease efforts to implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We stand for strengthening the central role of the UN. Otherwise, it would be difficult to mobilize all states toward reaching global climate goals. Russia supports network alliances. Regional aspects of the world's development are gaining momentum. In conclusion, all of us are in the same boat. We are all different, but this must not bar us from working for the benefit of our nations and all of humanity. I would like to propose a hashtag UN Charter is our rules. Thank you.
I would like to thank the representative of Russian Federation, Foreign Minister Mr. Mohammad Rauhan Ahmad for his statement. Next, I would like to invite the representative of Tanzania, Her Excellency the President Ms. Fatma Zaina Mohammed, to make her statement.
Thank you, Chair. Your Excellency, President of the General Assembly, Your Excellency, Secretary General of the General Assembly, Excellencies, Head of States of Governments, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I congratulate you, Madam President, for being elected to preside over this Assembly's 76th session and for the exemplary manner in which you have presided over this session. I also commend you for making it possible for us to meet physically despite the difficult circumstances brought about by the pandemic. Madam President, this is my maiden speech at the United Nations General Assembly. Tanzania will always be grateful to you for your considerate and consoling messages, in which enabled us to prevail of other than the unprecedented taste in our nationhood. I applaud the outgoing President for dedicating a slot in the 15th plenary meeting of the General Assembly on April 16th of 2021 to pay tribute to our beloved late President, Dr. Magufuli. May he rest in peace. Madam President, it is no coincidence that my first travel outside of Africa since taking office was to attend the United Nations General Assembly. I did so out of my strong belief and faith in multilateralism. Tanzania will remain a prominent member of the United Nations and a committed supporter of multilateralism under my administration. Madam President, when the COVID-19 vaccines were being created, all of us around the globe hoped that it would be beneficial for all of humanity. Nonetheless, we have discovered that the vaccine is outpacing the virus is outpacing the vaccine manufacturing and distribution on a global scale. At this rate, we will be less likely to fulfill the WHO goal of achieving at least 40%, vaccinating at least 40% of the population in every nation by the end of 2021 and at least 70% by the first half of 2022. Madam President, when the COVID-19 vaccines were being produced, several countries had a higher amount of vaccination inequality than others. It is depressing to realize that most countries have vaccination inequality of less than 2% of the population. They urge patent rights on the COVID-19 vaccines to be waived so developing nations may afford to produce vaccines and vaccinate their population. Madam President, the United Republic of Tanzania, like other countries, has been hit hard by the impact of COVID-19. While slowly trying to revive most economic activities suffocated by the pandemic, the government continues to work hard to improve business environment and attract more investments. We manage to sustain peace and steady political stability with a thriving democracy and an institutionalized good governance practices that promote the rule of law and human rights. Madam President, as my country's first female president, the burden of delivering gender equality is heavier on my shoulders. Recognizing that a strong commitment to gender equality is insufficient, my government is analyzing legislations and legislative frameworks to build practical and quantifiable ways to ensure women's economic empowerment, as well as other aspects of gender equality and gender priority. Madam President, the climate is having a serious impact on people's livelihoods. The pandemic has harmed our ability to adapt to a detrimental effects of climate change. With Tanzanian government spending 2 to 3% of its GDP to strengthen community resilience. In this regard, I advocate for transparent method of financial disbursement, as well as reminder that the developed countries must fulfill their commitment to provide $100 billion annually by 2025 in order to enable their Paris Agreement executions. In conclusion, Madam President, I would like to express my country's adherence to the values of multilateralism inherited in the United Nations Charter. Other countries should continue to assist this institution. Multilateralism must always prevail. Madam Chairman, I thank you, and I thank you all for your kind attention. Thank you.
I would like to thank the representative of Tanzania, Her Excellency, the President, Ms. Fatma Zaina Mohammed, for her statement. I would like to invite the representative of United Kingdom, Her Excellency, the Prime Minister, Ms. Ain Fazil, to make her statement.
Madam President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, an inspection of the fossil record over the last 108 million years reveals that the average mammalian species exists for about 1 million years. And of our allotted lifespan of 1 million, humanity has been around for 200,000. In other words, we are still collectively a youngster. We still cling with the part of our minds to the infantile belief that the world was made for our own gratification and pleasure. We combine this narcissism with an assumption of our own immortality. We trash our habitats again and again with the inductive reasoning that we have got away with it so far and we will get away with it again. My friends, the adolescence of humanity is coming to an end. The world, this precious blue sphere with its eggshell crust and wisp of an atmosphere, is not some indestructible toy. We must limit the rise in temperatures and show that we have the maturity and wisdom to act, and we can. Even in this reckless youth, we have harnessed clean energy from wind, waves, and sun. We have tools for a green industrial revolution, but time is desperately short. And that is why the Glasgow COP26 summit is the turning point for humanity. If we keep on the current track, then the temperatures will go up by 2.7 degrees or more by the end of the century. And never mind what that would do to the ice flows. We will see desertification, drought, crop failure, and mass movements of humanity in a scale not seen before. Not because of some unforeseen natural event or disaster, but because of us, because of what we are doing now. We need all countries to step up and pledge collectively to achieve carbon neutrality and have substantial reductions by 2030. And I passionately believe that we can do it by making commitments in 4 areas: coal, cars, cash, and trees. The way to fix this problem is through science and innovation. In the UK, we have cut our greenhouse emissions by 44% in the last 30 years, while expanding our GDP by 78%. However, we need to restore the natural balance, and we need to halt and reverse the loss of trees and biodiversity by 2030. We must go further, and we must be clear that government alone would not be able to do enough. Every day, green startups are producing new ideas, from feeding seaweed to cows, to restrain their traditional science of digestive approval, to using artificial intelligence and robotics to enhance food production. And it is these technologies that will cut the cost for consumers so that we have nothing to fear and everything to gain from this green industrial revolution. I hope that the COP26 will be the 16th birthday for humanity in which we choose to grow up, to recognize the scale of the challenge that we face today, and to do what posterity demands we must. Thank you.
I would like to thank the representative of United Kingdom, Her Excellency, the Prime Minister, Ms. Ain Fazil, for her statement. Excellencies and distinguished delegate, as we have covered the agenda item scheduled for this evening, I wish to adjourn the session for today. It is so decided. Thank you all very much.